Okay, this is lesson 8.08, which is we're going to be able to arrange the steps to prove the quadratic formula. So what does it mean to prove the quadratic formula? It means to show where the formula comes from. The formula x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That could look like something that someone made up, but this actually comes from somewhere, and we're going to prove where this comes from. How are we going to prove it? We're going to prove it by solving for x using the complete the square method. Okay, so let me go ahead and cover these up really quick, because I'm going to kind of be solving them and talking about the steps as we complete them. And so the first thing that we would do here, if we were completing the square, is we would subtract 21 from both sides. That way, it simplifies to 3x squared plus 24x equals a negative 21. So what are we actually doing there? We're subtracting c from both sides, right? This is the constant. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to subtract c from both sides, leaving us with ax squared plus bx equals a negative c. This is the same step. Next, what we would do here is we would go ahead and we would divide every term by 3 so that the coefficient of x squared is 1. So divide everything by 3. We're left with x squared plus 8x equals a negative 7. So again, we're going to go ahead and we're going to divide every term by a is actually what we did. So here we're going to go ahead and divide every term by a, leaving us with x squared plus b over ax equals negative c over a. Our next step is a little bit, this is the actually completing the square part. So we're going to take the b term, we're going to divide it by 2, and then we're going to square it. And we're going to add that to both sides. Okay, so what did we do? We added b divided by 2 squared to both sides. X squared plus b over ax equals negative c over a, and we're going to add something to both sides. So I'm going to do a little scratch work for this first. So we're going to take this term, we're going to divide it by 2, and then square it. Now what that actually is, I can rewrite this a different way. Take that term, divide it by 2, and then square it. Instead of dividing by 2, we want to multiply by the reciprocal. Multiply straight across. And so this is what we're actually adding to both sides. Okay? Switch these cards out. So now what we want to do is we want to take this and we just want to simplify it. X squared plus 8x plus 8 divided by 2 is 4. 4 squared is 16. Equals negative 7 plus 16, which is 9. All we did is we simplified. So we're going to rewrite this as x squared plus b over ax. We need to simplify this. We'll simplify that by taking b divided by 2a and squaring it, which really means that we multiply it times itself. B times b is b squared. 2 times 2 is 4. A times a is a squared. Same thing with the left side, except we need to also combine like terms. So I need to do a little bit more scratch work. We have negative c over a plus b divided by 2a squared, which is really this. So in order to add these fractions, we need a common denominator. That common denominator is going to be 4a squared. So we need to take this term. We need the denominator have a 4 in it, so we're going to multiply it by 4 over 4. That would give us 4a. We need to be a squared, so we're also going to multiply it by a over a. The numerator becomes negative 4ac divided by 4a squared plus b squared over 4a squared. Now that they have a common denominator, I can add them. I really want the numerator to be written with the b squared term first, so I'm just going to rearrange these, keeping the signs. And this is the simplified version of that. So it's equal to b squared minus 4ac all over 4a squared. Part of this should look familiar. Let me go ahead and switch my cards again. Move this up. So next, what we want to do here is we want to take this and we want to rewrite it as a perfect square. So it's going to be equal to the b term divided by 2. So 4. So we'll rewrite the left side as a perfect square. So it's going to be x plus this term divided by 2, which if you remember, we did that divided by 2, and it equaled b over 2a. The next thing that we want to do is we're going to take this perfect square and we want to square root both sides because we're trying to isolate x, right? So we're going to square root both sides. First, rewrite the whole thing. And we're going to square root both sides. Next, we want to simplify. So since this cancels out, we're left with x plus 4 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 9, which is 3. So we simplify. Now, this is going to be equal to x plus b over 2a equals, and we need to simplify this. So let me make a little note here. If you are square rooting something like 9 over 16, what we can do is we can split the square root up into the square root of the numerator divided by the square root of the denominator. So we can square root each one individually, making this 3 over 4. The same thing holds true for something like this. If we have the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 4a squared, we could split up the square root into the numerator and the denominator. Square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by the square root of 4a squared. Now remember, the square root takes care of perfect squares. So 4 times 4 is 16. Therefore, the square root of 16 is 4. Here, this is like the square root of 4 times the square root of a squared. Let me go down a little bit here. b squared minus 4ac actually can't be simplified, but the denominator is the square root of 4, which is 2, the square root of a squared, which is a. So this simplifies to this. Switch cards one last time. So now, in order to isolate x, we're going to go ahead and we're going to subtract 4 from both sides, leaving us with x equals negative 4 plus or minus 3. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to subtract the constant to the other side to isolate x. So this is what we need to subtract so that it cancels. Negative b over 2a. Oh, there is a plus or minus here. It's my mistake. And now we need to simplify That's gone, so we get x equals. Now, since they have a common denominator, we can add the numerators. Negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And that is the quadratic formula. If you need to, replay this once or twice to understand how to do it.